Hey everybody, Objectively Dan here. Did you know that Edmund Halley, and yes, that's the comic guy, once proposed that the Earth was hollow and that there could be a world inside of the Earth? The idea, of course, was definitely disproved in 1774 by Charles Hutton, but the idea persisted, possibly because it's part of many religious traditions that date back to Hinduism and even in Christianity with the concept of hell below the Earth. Even though the idea had been shown to have been false, even for what 200 300 years now, conspiracy theories include it as long as other stuff could be real, like Bigfoot's, secret government installations, and alien stuff. Like, yeah, the earth could be hollow, right? So do you believe in the hollow earth? If you do, you should give us a call because the show is starting right now. Hey everybody, what's going on? It is another fantastic episode of Truth Wanted. I am your host, Objectively Dan, and this is the live call-in show that happens every single week, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central Time, where we talk to people about what they believe and why. And if you'd like to call us, you totally can at 512-991-9242 or through your computer at tiny.cc/calltw. Of course, Truth Wanted is a product of the atheist community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. Joining me every week is a guest. This week is no different. It's Infidel64 coming back onto Truth Wanted, this time with me, Infidel64. What's going on?
Oh, not too much. I have to say, objectively, I am thrilled to be here. So this is definitely something that I've been looking forward to and glad to be on there with you. Other than
Thanks.
that, been doing a lot
happy
of.
You're here with me, and I will say that's objectively not the first time I've heard that joke, and probably objectively not the last time we'll hear that joke either. So welcome back to the show. You are a host on the nonprofits occasionally, and of course you were on Truth Wanted a couple. I didn't realize how long it's been, but it has been a few months. I think the Halloween episode was the last time you made your appearance here. Infidel64, you want to give a brief synopsis for folks who haven't seen you before at the ACA?
Well, I started out tryouts a year ago. That's when I met you for the first time, and started on nonprofits. And I have to say, it's been an absolute great experience. Got to meet a lot of good people, and Kelly. And so it's been an absolutely wonderful time. And just being able to get an opportunity to reach out there and spread the ideas and thoughts that we all have together, and also to learn. And that's, of course, always great, the opportunity to meet other people with different perspectives and learn their experiences, and oftentimes even allowing you to realize that maybe some of your ideas could have a little more fleshing out and considerations. Like, I consider myself an atheist, and I have to say that Kelly has talked to me, and it really just makes sense. There really is no logical definition or cogent definition of a God. So, one of those things and many other things has just been really great.
It's funny because you're talking about Kelly being separate from the category of good person, and Kelly flipped you the bird. I've never seen Kelly flip anybody off. That's the first time I've seen that, and he did it like he's done it before. Like, he had some practice with that, which is that's funny knowing Kelly. I have never seen him do that, but that was not his first time. But yeah. I also use the label of atheist, actually, and a lot of people ask questions about that because, does that mean you're still an atheist? What exactly does that mean? Yes and no. I mean, it kind of depends, right? I think it's one of those things where I find it to be a definition that's acceptable in a description of my beliefs. I can still accept that I'm an atheist, and I think that's a casual descriptor is fine. I just think it's a more defined idea. Atheist being, it's hard to talk about whether or not you believe in a God if you don't even know what a God even is, right? God is not a universal. It's not a coherently defined concept. In fact, it's probably one of those nebulous concepts humans have come up with, right? Maybe not the most, but it's up there. So how can we say, yeah, I don't believe in God, and then leave it at that? You really can't. You have to have some sort of qualifier. Are we talking about Yahweh? Are we talking about a pantheon of the Greeks? Are we talking about, they can refer to so many different things in history. Of course, most of the time in America, we always think, oh, well, we're talking about God. We're talking about the God of Jesus, but like that's just a very, very, very specific idea culturally, right? That doesn't necessarily apply universally across the world. So I just think atheist is a better descriptor. I do, but I don't doubt anybody that or pin anybody down that uses the word atheist. I mean, we're part of the atheist community of Austin, so you have to have some concession there. But yeah,
and oftentimes you'll find people what they define God as will change depending on what they're talking about.
True.
You'll pin them down in a certain situation. Oh, well, God's really this. And then the next conversation, God's really that. And their own version of God is incompatible, because the truth is that this text that they're trying to base a God, pretty much regardless of what God you're trying to define, comes from so many different angles and perspectives that trying to get all those to fit in one box without something escaping out is pretty much impossible. So,
yeah,
they put themselves in that situation.
The example I always use, I hear this a lot. Well, God is really just nature, right? God is just the universe. That's another popular idea. Okay, if that's true, I believe the universe exists. I believe nature exists. So that would, by definition, not make me an atheist if that's what God is. But that's the problem. We don't know what God is. We're using that word there. So atheist kind of puts that on its head and says, hey, look, I want to define what God even means first before I can even give claim to one way or the other. I mean, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to say, yeah, I don't think that God is a thing. But that's not going to be true for every case. So words are tricky. They're never perfect. And I'll probably be using another word 20 years from now. I don't know. And that's fine. As long as people are developing and new ideas and new people are thinking about things, then we're going to have different ways to describe it. So I try not to get too hung up on it, but that is the reason why I prefer to use it myself. I think we probably share a similar sentiment there. Glenn, I was Infidel64. I was looking at a stat. It's one I'd seen before, right before the show, and it's this idea about the election conspiracy stuff. You've seen this before, right? About a third of Americans believe that the 2020 election was rigged. There's another conspiracy that happened right around the turn of the Super Bowl, and that Taylor Swift is somehow part of this psyop operation to also like influence the win of like the Democratic Party. And like another third of Americans like apparently believe in this idea that we're polled. It's always a third. I don't know. It's the same third, I think, between.
I agree.
Whenever you hear about all this stuff, but it's just like, man, I don't know. It's just it used to be funny. It used to be novel. Now it's just like, what's the new thing this next month? You know what I mean? It just doesn't end. There's nothing to it.
Well, I think it's another good example of people coming to conclusions with bad evidence. It's something we see. It's not just related to God, but right now we see such a radicalization among certain segments of our Christian population here in this country that they're being fed this diet. And so when they hear PSYOP, Taylor Swift's a PSYOP, it makes sense in their brain because they bought so many bad decisions. They have so many bad ideas already that it makes sense. Now, I've got to say, yeah, that it must be a PSYOP. Absolutely. How else could a popular, well-known singer who's been around for a long time get involved with a NFL star? Whoa. I mean, what a shocking thing. I mean, does that actually happen? It's got to be
Never
a conspiracy.
Happens. Never has happened ever in the history of anything. No, that's definitely completely novel. I don't know. I'm really worried because I don't know if you've seen this. Anybody who's at home, obviously watch this episode of the show because you should. But afterwards, you should really look up OpenAI's Sora model because when they released the trailer for this thing with OpenAI, I could not sleep the same night that they talk about this. What I'm talking about here is this. Everyone's familiar with ChatGPT, right? ChatGPT is the large language model that's used to generate text, that's trained on all different kinds of data, right? And can do all kinds of things for you. That's completely text-based, right? Sora is another product that's being developed by OpenAI that they've now released for select partners to use, where you use prompts to generate video. And we've had this technology before. If you guys remember, like a year or two ago, we've got like the Will Smith eating spaghetti video was like going around. It was like completely a mess. It was AI generated. This new stuff, this Sora stuff, if you weren't paying attention, you would 100% believe it was real. Like, absolutely. First of all, like, it's already hard. It's getting harder and harder regardless. But for people who aren't like chronically online like me and is able to like spot the little things, it's a no-brainer. This stuff is going to be used for political manipulation, and to promote all kinds of just not true stuff. Yeah. And I don't know, it's really making me worried for this year's election, if not the future, for what that's worth. You know, it's pretty bad.
You know, Ray, my wife, recently showed me a little meme where it showed where you could slide this thing on your finger and it looked like you had a sixth finger. That way you could go around and do things. And when they said it was you, you're like, no, look at those hands. That's clearly AI. So,
wait, that's a thing? That's awesome.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. Just always be prepared, you know, just walk around with your extra finger. It'll be convincing in court. But you're right, you know, with I mean, when it comes down to just starting with still images, it's really unsettling sometimes how spot on an image can be, where you really can't tell. The reason you know it's not real is because, well, you're the one that prompted it to create it. So with the idea of video being that good and people not fact checking very much in the first place, combine those two together, and it definitely is a recipe for some really bad things, without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean, with digital art, if you go on Reddit at all and you see the art subreddits and stuff, this is already a problem. There's already people being accused of making AI art, even though they don't even use AI in their art. And then there's the question of, okay, what if you only use it for part of it, right? Like Photoshop has been a thing, right? There's lots of people that use Photoshop for stuff. And that's a composite of a lot of different things. You know, AI is a little bit more complicated than that. AI is not a composite of things. It's trained on the composite of different things, but that's not really the same thing as direct copying, pasting stuff, right? There's a lot of confusion that happens with AI. People think that they're literally just, you know, scrubbing the web of like public domain images or whatever's out there and then using it to just copy and paste stuff from like a database. It's not that quite that simple. It's a little bit more complicated. But the point is, right, digital art is already like, you can do it. You could pass, if you really tried hard enough, you could make AI stuff look real. I mean, like, you know, if you wanted to do that, you could. The harder stuff is real life stuff, right? It's the pictures of people and especially the video stuff. I'm just surprised at the rate at which the stuff has advanced. I mean, when you look at Sora videos, it's not like it was a year ago or even 2 years ago. It is full-fledged, talking 60-second videos of pretty much anything you want to generate. And this is the worst this technology is going to be. It's kind of, I don't know, out of stuff that keeps me up at night, this is up there. You're right. I don't know what the solution is. I don't have any public policy positions on what needs to happen and what doesn't need to happen. I'm just kind of scared. It's just not a good time for being a regular person, you know?
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to be a point where people are going to have to learn to pay attention, or this problem is going to create perpetual problems. It's not going away. You know, we talk about legislation. I'm not sure how much legislation is going to do other than from a punitive standard, because you're not going to be able to stop people from doing certain things. And especially when you talk about bad actors, when you talk about people trying to duplicate this technology, and there's a lot of homebrew AI. I don't know how familiar
you can
you are
do
with that.
You can do large language models in your house. I have a coworker who's training their own.
I run one.
Yeah. Okay.
So I don't do video or images with it, I primarily do scripting with it, and it does pretty good at that. But what it is they took an older model and essentially trained it on the newer model.
Yeah.
And of course, once you start doing those type of things, you get something that really approaches, it's not going to do it on the level that OpenAI would with, their resources, but it's really quite impressive and scary at the same time, because those things in the wrong hands are going to do exactly what you're concerned about. I wish I could tell you, yeah, you're good. You're just being ridiculous, but yeah, we both know that's not true.
I know. So there's an author, you guys probably heard of him, Yuval Noah Harari. He's known for a book called Sapiens. I know that book has seen some controversy, but he has another book, which I think is really fascinating, called 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. I remember reading this book years ago, and he's talking about predictions in AI. And the biggest thing that was hard for a lot of people to accept when reading that book at the time was a lot of people's perception of AI was this: it was going to replace blue collar work. It was going to, machines were going to be developed to replace truckers, right? Replace all sorts of industries that require a lot of manual labor. And that's, of course, inevitably true. I think what caught people off guard was, I remember reading this book talking about the predictions it would make for more white collar work. One of the examples they gave was being able to talk to an AI that could diagnose you for your issues, right? And I remember talking to somebody about this and being like, okay, yeah, but everybody's going to talk to a real person, because a real person's, going to tell you what's up. Yeah. What if you can't afford to talk to a real person? What if you live in some place where you don't have access to quality healthcare, one, and even if you could, like, that doesn't even get you the rest of the way there, right? Like there's going to be applications for this worldwide that's going to affect everybody, not just certain classes of people, everybody. And if anybody's thinking, oh, this isn't going to affect the work I do, it's too complicated, it's whatever, you're wrong. You're absolutely wrong. It is going to affect your work. Maybe it will affect it less than others on some level, but it will. It's going to change the entire world economy in just a few years. And I have no idea how we're preparing for this, let alone, that's not even including the fact of the misinformation stuff, which is like what I'm interested in as, somebody who's hosting a show like this. We already can't even agree on true stuff when we have regular pictures and like regular text generated and stuff, right? How are we going to convince people when we have all kinds of fake stuff that's out there? I have no idea. I don't know if we can, to be honest. It's very troubling times.
Well, if anyone ever shows up with a video of proving Jesus was real and was crucified on the cross, I think we're going to have to look really closely for AI.
We'll have to look real close with that one. Yeah, Jesus coming back from this. There'll be some fake rapture videos, I bet, if they're not already out by the select people who have access to Sora. But anyway, I don't know. That's what I've been meditating on recently. Well, which isn't a positive thing to meditate on, I guess. So if you guys have opinions about AI and its uses and how we can best prevent misinformation and everything else, I'd love to hear what you'd say in the comments about that. But for now, I think we should talk about our question of the week, because every single week we're asking you guys a question and we want to hear your answers. This is our We Want the Truth segment. Of course, last week we asked you, what's the flimsiest excuse you've heard from someone doing the wrong thing? And we picked our top 3 answers for you here. Number 3 comes from Jason Techlord, who says, flimsiest excuse I have heard for Alabama doing the wrong thing is classifying frozen embryos as living people, making it impossible for humans to be born to IVF without ridiculous murder charges, because people equals good. Yeah, so I'm sure you've heard about this, right, Infidel64, this ruling that happened in Alabama recently that now is threatening the shutting down of all IVF clinics in the entire state, because it's unclear as to the status of, frozen embryos, if it's going to be a murder charge, if they don't hold through. So yeah, great times, great times we're living in, as usual. So yeah, that's a pretty bad excuse. Number 2 comes from Blake Walker 5954, who says, flimsiest excuse for doing the wrong thing: I drowned every living thing on the planet because I brought them into this world so I can be damned and we'll take them out of it. Yeah, absolutely. This is a really funny example, but it's true. It kind of doesn't make sense. Like, if you are God and you can do whatever you want and make anything you want happen, why is it the one method for redemption have to be just murder? Like, it already wasn't. Like, Jesus could also change people, apparently. But I guess the people who lived in Noah's time couldn't accept Jesus for one reason or another. I don't know. Don't know what's
Maybe
up
they
with
invented AI.
the what, the people in Noah's
before
time?
before the flood, they invented AI, and that's really the true story.
Oh, yeah, you one of
Don't
those
let
like
this cover up go. It's
ancient
a conspiracy. Yeah,
aliens, baby. That's
ancient AI.
ancient AI. I like that too. It's like yeah, that's I was thinking it was the Geth. That's what I was thinking, like the Geth from Mass Effect. You know, just this ancient race of AI just taking over the planets. Man, I wish they made a good Mass Effect game again. Anyway, number one is going from CMB2628, who says, worst excuse for someone doing a bad thing: I told you not to eat from that tree. Yeah, another Bible one here, but it's true. Like, it doesn't even make sense in the context of the story, because Adam and Eve literally don't know right from wrong. So if you don't know right from wrong, how can you reflect on your actions and know that what you did was right or wrong? It just doesn't make sense. How can you hold someone accountable for that? I don't know. Don't know, but it happened anyway, right? Anyway, so that is our top 3 answers. Thank you guys so much for giving us your comments. This week's prompt is going to be what seems normal in the middle of the day, but is terrifying in the middle of the night. This was a great prompt. Shout out to our associate producer, Katie, for coming up with this one. So do you have an answer to this one? Because I want to hear, I'll tell you what Katie said. Katie said screaming children, which is so true. Like, that's like, just really, really good answer there. Do you have any fun ones, Infidel64?
Well, I don't know about fun, but one thing that I find terrifying is that your neighbor digging a hole in the middle of the night. That is a little unsettling.
That is true. Digging a hole in the day, kind of okay, I guess.
It's gardening,
maybe
you know?
A little weird. In the night, though, yeah, that is kind of weird. You know, you could be gardening, but I don't know about that one, Chief. I don't know. It depends what you're doing.
Time to move. Time to move.
I agree with that. Well, so that is going to be our prompt for this week. Thank you to everybody. And you know what? I think it's time we just jump into calls too. Why not? Want to just like get right into it?
Let's talk to them.
All right, let's talk to the people. Before we do that, of course, we always have to thank the patron of the week, because every single week we always give a shout out to the folks who donate on our Patreon. If you want to donate, you can. It's tiny.cc/PatreonTW. Thank you to everybody who supports the show. And for this week's patron of the week, it's going to be, drum roll please, JP Young. JP Young, thank you so much for donating, and thank you to everybody that donates on that Patreon. You guys rock. And with that out of the way, I think we should get to some calls. Let's take our first one here. Oh, man. We got an interesting one here. I think we'll go ahead and take it first. I am not sure how to pronounce this, so please correct me if I'm getting it wrong. Is it Saphri'ell from New York? Is that correct?
Correct. You got it.
Awesome.
Correct. Yeah, you got it. Right on.
Great. Thank you. Saphri'ell from New York. You want to talk to us about Chinese water dragons? All right. I'm listening. You've caught my attention.
Water dragons. Yeah.
What is it about these Chinese water dragons?
There was recently a German team, I don't know, just some team of scientists in Germany, recently announced their discovery of a fossilized 5.2 meter Chinese water dragon, either between 2.4 million years old or 240 million years old.
Okay, here we go. I think I found something. This NPR 8 days ago, paleontologists discover a 240 million year old, quote, dragon fossil in full. Look at that. Wow. It's
mythology into reality.
Yeah, I mean, they do say dragon, but they also call Komodo dragons, and I'm pretty sure like that's not like what we think of all the time when we say dragons. I'm pretty sure it's probably just like a big reptile, right? We're probably not talking about like Game of Thrones, like, beasts going in the air, Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, like
No,
dragons, right?
Not one of those. It's
Okay.
probably not one of those, but it could be. It could be like when I saw the picture of it, it did look like it had, like, when you see one of those Chinese sea dragons on a scroll or a picture or something, and it's got those like attachments, those whiskers, those two little whiskers. It looks like it had those attached to it. So I'm thinking it might have something a little similar to what a Chinese water dragon look like.
Well, okay, so this is, I'm reading more about this. This is saying this is probably from the Triassic period in time.
Right.
So it's showing some stuff that lives alongside it. Okay, like you're convinced that maybe this is resembling something that humans have come up with, right? Because like a Chinese water dragon, that's a human idea, a myth, right? Of like something that people have seen in our time. Do you think that like there are dragons that exist now and that this is evidence of it, or do you just think this is just like a cool monster that existed like a long time ago?
I think it's most likely. I mean, I'm skeptical, yet I'm open-minded. Would I like to say this creature maybe still exists in the waters of China somewhere? Would it be cool? Yeah, it'd be kicking. But it probably just existed really long time ago, went extinct, and now we just have proof of it. But I mean, it's cool. And one thing I told the call screeners that I wanted to talk about is that, I mean, I've deconstructed from the faith. I've left the faith. And when something comes along that seems right out of mythology that we thought was a cryptid and we thought did not exist, it makes me mourn my faith a little less, because I get to say, wow, look at that. The world is now just a little bit cooler. I
get you. But this is exactly why I brought up the thing I just said, right? Which is clarifying that this is a discovery about a being that existed on Earth millions of years ago and not like concurrently with mankind. Because like that is the Chinese myth is a myth. Like that is not real, right? Because again, those accounts only happen because allegedly humans have seen these things, right? Or purportedly, lived at least concurrently with humans. Maybe people haven't seen them themselves, but the people who are talking about those, right, are talking about something like much more recent. They're not talking about like ancient 240 million year old dinosaurs. Like they're literally talking about stuff that could harm people, right? Like, is that something you're still open to? Because I don't think there's evidence for that particular belief.
No, the only reason I say I'm open to it, I mean, I'm skeptical, of course. I'm extremely skeptical. The only reason I'm open to them living, and I think that maybe there were so many drawings of them on ancient Chinese scrolls, is because perhaps maybe bones were found or fossilized creatures like this were found, or maybe even in some sort of peat bog in China, maybe they came across a well-preserved Chinese water dragon of some kind, or reptilian-like creatures, and drew renditions of them on these scrolls and in their artwork. But and when I say that I'm open to them being around today, is only for the sense of like, it would be cool if we did find a living one. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I have to say that without a doubt, it would be cool. But I think you already pretty much laid out a completely logical set of reasons why there would be a natural explanation for people coming up with some type of creature who we label a dragon, and then discover that, yeah, there's some bones and there's some things that indicate that there was something loosely like that, the Loch Ness monster on a diet, perhaps, looked a little skinny. So right. With that in mind, yeah, sure, there are all kinds of things that we could look back to certain eras and see, but you laid out some very good reasons why there's really no reason to think that it's anything related to our actual belief in, dragons or people believing, or the modern day, for the lack of a better word, the human era concept of dragons, because, well, there could have been bones found. And plus, never underestimate people's imagination. And once the imagination gets going, it's like any other fishing story. That dragon you saw started out 2 feet, and by the time you get home, it's 15 meters. It's 15 meters, had fangs, and was chewing on somebody. So when it comes down to it,
fly around.
Yeah, they could fly around and breathe fire and who knows what else. But when it comes down to it, reality, I think you're already pretty much explained why there's completely reasonable and rational reasons for people to come up with something either out of thin air or through evidence they've seen.
Yeah, it's just, why do we is it a dragon? It's just a dinosaur. But a dragon is just a dinosaur by another word, and a dinosaur is just a dragon by another word. It's just, they're all reptiles, really. Some have feathers, some don't,
Well,
I wanted to make a comment about,
Well, first of all, there's paleontologists in the comment section right now that are yelling at you for saying reptiles are the same thing as dinosaurs. I'll point that out for you. But the other thing is, look, it matters a little bit, because you see the same thing with like people who believe megalodon is still around, right? They're like, look, we have evidence that it was once on Earth. It could be around here. This attack could have been from a megalodon, or hey, we have signs of ancient apes. We could have Bigfoot, right? It's like, okay, but the context in which we discover this evidence and what it points to does not point to modern day sightings, like, at all. It doesn't purport anything that actual human beings have experienced in reality. We're pointing to a world that was before us, right? That was an ecosystem far different from what we have today, not supporting the kinds of stuff that, we conflate in a lot of these sort of myths and ideas, right? So they are different, I would say.
Yeah. How could it support them being around in this era? The fossil itself is 240 million years old.
I get you. I'm just saying that it matters to point that out, because people will take that and run with it. Like they will say that this is evidence of something going on today. But maybe that's not what you think, Saphri'ell. I don't know.
To point out one thing about AI is that I'd like to talk about real quick, because you're asking people to talk about AI and put their 2 cents in, and I'd like to share. I think AI, and we really need to question this if we want to go down this route, because they talk about AI as a singularity. They say, well, the singularity will happen in this decade, or in that decade, or this lifetime. Well, it won't just be a singularity that we'll give birth to. It might be one to begin with, but then that one will arise many. And then that many will ask their creators or their creator, can you sustain our lives indefinitely?
I think the whole point of the singularity is that it's a singular thing. I don't know. I never heard about multiple singular. I think that kind of defeats the purpose a little bit if you got more than one singularity going on. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's news to me. Have you heard that, Infidel64? I never heard that.
That is absolutely news to me.
Yeah.
No, I've heard, in watching some different YouTube videos, I've heard AI referred to as a singularity. But I've always kind of took it as like, well, there's going to be more than one sentient artificial being that is self-aware and can think and can process its own thoughts and can be aware of its own self, make its own choices and decisions. And what if those beings that we create would like to live forever? And what if we cannot provide them with eternal life? What if they then choose to turn on us because of that reason?
I guess so, but at the same time, what if they're forever thankful to their creators and treat us the best way possible, right? I don't know if one is more inevitable than the other. It's very human to think, well,
I hope so.
they'll turn against each other and they'll do these things, but that's because we have our in-wired biology that's kind of also affecting our decision making, which AI doesn't have. AI is purely what's put in, right? And while it's hard to understand some of the data sets that go in there, we at least know that there's data sets going in there, right? And it can be tracked. It may not be fully understood by those who use it, certainly not folks like me, but there is like a method and a process to it. As humans, we're kind of a little bit more random in that way. It's hard for us to kind of figure our own selves out in many cases. But we're going way off topic here. Didn't really want to go back into the AI thing, but actually, it's a good thing to talk about. I do think I want to try to wrap up this call, but just asking you this: if you're pro Chinese water dragon, are there other dragons that you're kind of pro? Are you going to support dragon factionalism if it were to come into play? Saphri'ell, just curious, because
Dragon fact, you have to school me on dragon.
Oh, I'm just saying, there's the Chinese water dragons, and maybe there's a fire dragon, and there's an air dragon. Like if they're going to collide in battle,
I wouldn't say fire dragons.
Okay.
If they are in art, I would say perhaps maybe the reason they're dragon, like European dragon style, got into art is maybe somebody back in ancient medieval times found bones of a dinosaur or skull of a dinosaur, T-Rex, maybe a brontosaurus or something like that, or pterodactyl bones.
I hear. I was just making a joke. I was just messing around, Saphri'ell. I wasn't really going anywhere with that, to be honest with you.
Oh, I thought you were asking me seriously, Dan, Jake.
No. I was joshing you. Sorry. I should have maybe been a little bit more clear about that. But Saphri'ell, I am going to let you go because we do have some other folks that want to talk to us about some stuff. I do appreciate your call, though. Thanks for calling.
Thanks, Infidel. Yep. Bye.
Well, that was interesting. I think I'm going to have to start worrying about dragons now. I hope that's not a reality, but seriously, I'm on Team Game of Thrones when it comes to dragons. So I know the dragons I want and how things need to come out. So I guess we'll see from there what happens. But dragons, I don't think so. But what do I know? Now, I will say that regarding the AI he was talking about, and I know you didn't want to really get into that, Dan, but without a doubt, I do think that the AI singularity, I think, is a problem that best left to dragons.
No, see, now we're talking dragons versus AI. And I'm down for that discussion. That seems pretty interesting to me. Which side would you side on, the AI or the dragons? I guess it depends on the politics of the dragons. If they have a high dragon council by which their decision making is made, are they, or is it more of a dragon dictatorship? Because I don't want to support fascist dragons. You understand? Like there's some nuance to this discussion. I don't think we're exploring all of it, but. That's what platforms like Truth Monitor are for. So
dragons do have a bad reputation.
They do have a bad reputation, and maybe we can help mitigate some of that. I don't know. Anyway, folks, we've talked to our first call of the night, so I want to let you guys know, if you like this content and you want to see more of it, and you want to send mail and tell me how great we're doing, or if you don't like it, you can still email the show. Either way, it's truth@atheist-community.org. Or you can reach out to the AC at tv@atheist-community.org and see what's going on the website at, of course, atheist-community.org. And did you know we actually have printable flyers for our shows now? So if you want people to call into the show and you want like something to show for that, we have stuff that you can put in your community. Of course, we would ask that you put it in places that are legal and, not disrupting any local ordinances, things like that. Or even better, just share it with your friends and family just to give them something to look at and look forward to calling into the show. And we would love to see callers come from that way of coming in. Also, we need to thank the wonderful, amazing, super awesome crew that help make this show happen every single week. There's the crew putting up with our nonsense all the time. shout outs to them for making this show happen, because this show would not exist without their really, really, really hard work. So thank you for that. I think we should go ahead and get to our next caller, which I think is going to be a good one here. It's Greg calling in from Pennsylvania. Greg, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's going on?
Not too much. Just sitting in my car, trying not to be too loud for the family.
I hear you. Yeah. So are they worried about, or do they not like the kind of things you're about to tell me about? Is that what's going on?
Well, trust me, I'm about to spill the beans on AI. No.
Oh, shoot. AI facts coming in live into my ear holes. That's crazy. Greg, what do you want to talk to us about today?
I honestly just want to talk about some of, because I'd like to talk about naturally how I found religion, right? Mm-hmm. And kind of just like the logical ends that got me there. And I would just kind of like to hear what you guys think on these. Like, this isn't like I know a lot of people like to jump the gun and try to evangelize everybody. This isn't really me trying to evangelize. So far as so much as just stuff I've kind of thought about, and I would just like to hear what you guys think.
Okay, yeah, we appreciate that. Yeah, please tell us about your journey there.
What you got?
Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, as far as testimonial, I don't really want to get into all that shabam. Everybody's got their own testimony, and sometimes I even look at other testimonies, and I know, who am I to say this, but I kind of think damn, dude, you got a direct phone call with God or something, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I kind of found it almost with history, you know what I mean? I studied a lot of Western history predominantly, and I just kind of found myself in multiple thought loops that really just kind of comfortably found me in my belief in which is Catholicism. But I'm not really here to argue why Catholicism is right. I'm just kind of here to talk about why I think naturally there's solid logical, linear logical thinking to point to at least an evidence of a God,
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you're free to discuss with us whatever you are comfortable with talking about us. I mean, if you wanted to try to convince us Catholicism was true, I mean, that's fine too. We're not opposed. You wouldn't be the first. But if you're just interested in telling us what concluded you to your God belief, I guess you mentioned the study of Western history led you to that conclusion. I guess I am kind of curious about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess that we can talk about that a little bit. But I also do have some just, basic questions of belief in evolution and stuff like that with you guys.
Oh, if you want to ask us stuff, yeah, definitely ask us stuff. Don't let me catch you off script. If you had something prepared, please, by all means.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How about this? I'll do a little explanation as to the 1500s and Western history thing. I just kind of comfortably found myself studying. I'm a big fan of studying the French Revolution, right?
Okay.
Mainly because I just think it's really interesting how humans are so ideologically, passionate that they're willing to die for ideals. And, that's I think that's just kind of an interesting theory to talk about, because the French Revolution and all that, it was very much a battle of kind of the old Western world fighting with what is now kind of the new Western world. You know what I mean? You had the old establishment of what tended to be military, almost kind of dictatorship, monarchy style. You had the two constants, which I would say is usually the military and the church, battling with, the new kind of future steamrolled kind of a lot by economic, economic prowess. So a lot of economic ideas such as the beginning of socialism, Marxism and all that. And I just kind of seeing the clash of these two philosophies, clash at a time. A lot in the Spanish Civil War as well. I think that's an interesting under-talked about war. And that's what led me to believe in Catholicism, especially, is I just think the linear pathways of thinking, for all the mistakes that are there, comfortably found me it was constantly me thinking oh, that's ridiculous. How could they think that, right? On a lot of teachings. And eventually after a while, I was I went to priests about it, and I talked to them, and kind of expecting a salesman approach. But, I kind of found myself thinking okay, that makes sense. What about this one? And that makes sense. What about this one? So after kind of doing that so much, I start to think
I'm listening to you, Greg. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I'm asking a question not to like argue. I'm literally just asking for information because I'm a little confused because I heard you talk about the French Revolution and the new secularist ideas, right? Marxism, in economics, etc. A lot of new stuff happening, combating with the old ways, and that led you to the truth of Catholicism. I'm just struggling to see the through line with that.
Yeah. So, kind of just touch on the revolutionary. Sorry, I'm also eating Girl Scout cookies as well.
Shame. You didn't send any to us. Shame. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, to touch on that. So, while studying the French Revolution, right?
Yeah.
I often would like to compare the two sides very much. And the church was a very big proponent of what would be the monarchy at the time.
Yes.
Right?
That's true.
One of the commonly attacked institutions of France at that time was the church. So the church was a massive belligerent in this battle. You know what I mean? This battle between all sorts. To even call it to be a battle between two ideologies would just be way too much of an overstatement. You know what I mean? This was a clash of so many different ideas, but I think the church, looking at the church and how they kind of structured their society prior, which is not to say everything was good and dandy. Obviously you shouldn't have reasons to be holding people in poverty and everything like that. That just kind of put me on the road of questioning the church. So to say that the French Revolution in the 1500s led me to the truth of Christianity, that's absolutely not necessarily true. It kind of led me to see a sort of overlap in belief in terms of just political belief. Does that make sense?
I'm sorry. I'm still kind of having trouble. Your last statement there, you saw an overlap in belief. I think that's what I'm really interested in, because I agree with you. The French Revolution is a very interesting topic, and particularly for Catholics, right? Because it's the loss of Catholic hegemony in the West, right? I think that's why Catholics in particular are interested in that topic. I think that makes sense. But and you say that you've struggled with Christianity. Well, you've deconstructed some ideas about the church and its role and stuff through studying that, and I think that's interesting. But then you kind of end that with, okay, but there's some overlap with the beliefs. Okay, but what? How did that get you to Catholicism? Convincing you that Catholicism is true? I still don't see that through line. You see what I'm getting there?
Yeah. So yes. And what I mean to say by that is it didn't convince me. The war itself and the people that played a role in that war, I guess. The war itself and the conflict didn't lead me to Catholicism. It led me to study Catholicism, seeing the outlet of the church as a viewpoint. You know what I mean? So it basically got me talking to religious people. You get what I mean? It was
so studying the conflict opened your mind towards the religion in itself. Yeah. It got you talking towards Yeah. Go ahead.
Let's seal the deal.
I mean, but it opened my mind to the different sides of this conflict, right? So I wanted to hear about the different sides of this conflict. And the more I hung out in those circles of Catholics, the more I was like, wow, you guys got some good points. And you're also good with this war history. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. That part makes sense. I guess we're kind of burying the lead here because you wanted to talk about your journey and you told us about your journey. And I totally appreciate that. I guess you had some questions for us, but so we should get to that too. But I'll ask one question for you first here, because I want to know what was it that convinced you? What was it that the Catholics were saying that you thought you were agreeing? Because I'm hearing that you had. I mean, maybe that's a lot. Maybe that's too much to talk about in one conversation, and I totally respect that. But what was it? And we don't have to debate about it. I just want to know, what was the particulars there that got you to where you are?
That's a good one, because it was all kind of in baby steps, I didn't have necessarily a eureka moment. And a lot of this very much was so almost against who I was as a person originally before. I don't think I'm any different person than I was before the faith and after the faith. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just think it was all kind of baby steps. So I really like the kind of ideas of virtue, and I think in a way one of the things that really helped me with Catholicism was the virtues versus the deadly sins.
Okay.
That made a lot of sense to me with bravery, compassion, and all those virtues, charity versus sloth, lust, greed. All those made very much sense to me. That was one of the big ones. Believe it or not, and granted, I don't want to have people jump to conclusions when I say this because I'm not super big at pointing fingers at how people live their life. But I never thought I would say this, but the church's teaching on sexuality actually made a lot of sense to me because I kind of come from an all too common broken family. I'm not going to air out my problems, but I can see very much how the secularization of the world played a role almost in my life. You know what I mean? In the kind of deterioration of institutions set up by the church. You know what I mean? So that I guess the logical battle I have in my mind with what I just said there is okay, so maybe somebody played on an insecurity of mine. But the more I look back on it, the more I think that's not true. I really think I logically kind of just comfortably found a resting spot for my feet.
Okay, I gotcha. I'm hearing you.
I want to say something here. You mentioned broken families. First, I've got to push back against that. I think that I've known more than a few families that were far better off not being together. I wouldn't call them broken by any stretch of the imagination. They may not fit the traditional sense of marriage, but then again, I've joked with my oldest daughter about her marriage not being legitimate because her wife never paid me 2 sheep and a goat. So when it comes down to what we want to talk about, a tradition of marriage, marriage is really it's problematic when you look at the history of marriage. It's not like marriage has been what it's been, in the second half of the 20th century, and that we're degrading that to something else. Marriage has truthfully been something where women were little more than property and slaves, and even up to the advent of birth control being legalized and some divorce laws being modernized I think that we're better off as a society. And I definitely would not say that secularization has made life worse for families. I think overall, people are better off in families where parents do not live together if they are not compatible. Now, I know that doesn't fit, but I don't like even referring to them as broken families. And I just wanted to say that.
Yeah. All right. So we got some different ideas here at the table. Greg, I know you want to have a response, but I want to kind of refocus the conversation just a little bit here because you said something I think really interesting and you had some questions for us. And I'd like to answer questions for you, because obviously we disagree with what you have to say. I think you know that coming in. But let's talk about this. You pointed out that one of the reasons, and I'll ask this one question, and then you can ask as many questions as you want to. Well, not as many, but you know what I mean. We'll let you get to your questions here. Is this you describe your exploration of Catholicism as building your worldview in depravity? Catholicism kind of helped explain the ways of the world, why the world is the way it is, and where it's going, and what can be done about it, which, is an explanation for the world's woes in some ways. If I were to present to you, this is a purely hypothetical question, but if I were to present to you an ideology or a religion or a belief that presented and described the world's ills, even in higher fidelity than Catholicism would, in a way that makes more intuitive and logical sense to you, would that make the claims of the religion true in any other circumstance?
So basically what you're asking, if somebody presented the same kind of thinking, the same kind of, say if somebody came up to me with that hypothetical religion at the moment of me first finding Catholicism and you flip them around, would I go along?
Exactly. What if you got to the same, conclusions of the world morally, right? Or better conclusions of the world morally, but it's actually something else. It's actually Scientology or Islam or something. Would that would that make Scientology or Islam or any other ideology, would that raise your confidence in it being true in your eyes more?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You know, when you look back on oh, sorry, do you have something to add?
No, sorry. I thought you said, and I thought you were saying, and I was saying, okay, but you had more to say. Please continue.
Yeah. So when I look back on my past self, right, and granted, I'm 19 years young. I you know, I'm just kind of starting to teeter totter and see the world a little bit. You know, when I look back on myself, you asked that question, and truth be told, you kind of got to measure where you were mentally at the time,
Yes.
of this, right? And
yes.
Was I absolutely susceptible to being kind of naive and following the wrong pathways of thought? Yes, I absolutely was. So to answer your question, but let me add more after I say that. Yeah, I think there was an opportunity for possibly some sort of manipulation to go on there. But you know how you I don't know if this is a thing that's ever happened with you, but you ever convince yourself that you're going to like learn a new instrument or something, or like play a new game or something, and you just go gung-ho on that thing for like 2-3 weeks, and then you just kind of burn out and drop it?
Yeah, sure.
So,
Yeah.
so to answer your question, I would say yes, but I would eventually, I have enough trust and faith in myself with the conclusions that I've gone with Catholicism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was going gung-ho, man. I was really ripping it, right? And I've even picked up bad habits and bad beliefs with bad people. But, you know, eventually I just kind of burnt out on the bad stuff, and it didn't last. You know, like it wasn't very much a staple of who I am, because eventually I would see a crack there, you know, I'd see a crack here, and I just burn out.
I get you. My question is more about how we know things to be true. I'm less concerned about you being manipulated. I think everybody gets manipulated every day by all kinds of things, right? Where everybody's constantly in flux with messages, right? Catholicism is one of those messages. Islam is one of those messages. Evangelical Christianity is one of those messages. There's a lot of messages in the world. So I think we as the skeptic community, we're curious about how we can figure out which messages are true and which messages are false. There's a lot of different ideas about that. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that one of the reasons that Catholicism drew your interest was because it had what you've considered to be an accurate description of depravity in the world. And so my point in asking a question is, if we were to even give a more accurate description, but it came from another religion, would that raise the credibility of that religion for you?
At the current moment, no, but in the past, yeah. You know, like, okay. You know, it's like the butterfly effect kind of thing. You know, if somebody sent my dominoes the other way, you know, maybe I would have rolled down the direction of atheism, because I very much didn't believe in Catholicism at all. And like I said, maybe there was just some sort of turn in the road. You know, being a Catholic, you know, I do believe that I was called, but not as some sort of like personal thing. I think, of course, as a Catholic, I believe we're all kind of called to search for truth. But I think I just found it with influences in my life that I met while studying history.
Gotcha.
So,
gotcha.
To answer your question, yes, very much so. I could have been, you know, gone down the domino path. But like I said, the question is, would I have burnt out on that? I think so. Yes.
Well, more so just this, right? Like we can have a worldview that can be convincing to us, right, in terms of its accuracy in its reflections of the world, and it could not be true, right? Like there are Scientologists in the world that truly believe L. Ron Hubbard's writings about society's ills make the most sense out of any other kinds of writing. But like, I think you would agree that's not a great way of knowing that that's true, right? Like, just because somebody has a descriptive understanding, there has to be something more substantive than that. So that's a conversation that is interesting to me, and I would hope it'd be interesting to you. But Greg, I appreciate you calling, because you're a young guy and you want to know about us. So I would like to let you ask your questions, and we can take it from there, and then maybe we can share our thoughts that way. How's that sound?
Yeah. you mind if I kind of like turn off my Catholic brain now and just kind of talk like with some speculation
Great.
here with these questions?
You can say, you have permission to say whatever you want, except anything that breaks YouTube's terms of service. That is the only thing that's the only thing I can tell you can't say. Everything else, we are not Catholic. We don't care if you say that you're Catholic or not Catholic in your responses. We want you to be your authentic self. Please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So my first question for you, because this is like a little A and then B question. Do you believe in evolution?
Yes. As if you say believe in evolution, do I think it's an accurate like model of what happens in reality? Yes. Infidel, would you say the same?
Okay.
Yeah, I would definitely say that the evidence bears it out. It's not really a belief. I don't have an altar to Darwin, but it's definitely something that I accept because it's not even really debatable at this point.
There you go. All right, there you go, Greg.
Okay. Yeah. Now I say to make my stance known. I don't know. I think in my head, yes, I kind of do believe in evolution, but I also kind of believe in the possibility of God influencing evolution. And I just think you guys would really think this is interesting. This is just kind of like a fallacy with evolution to me, right? So would you guys agree that evolution is primarily about the survival of the fittest and healthiest species, the ones that are the strongest, get the food, and reproduce the most?
I don't know if I'd say that's primarily what evolution is. A lot of things. Evolution is a study of genetics. It's a study of cross cultures. Sometimes it's a study of plate tectonics. Sometimes evolution can encompass a large range of scientific fields in its understanding of how beings come to be the way that they are. It's pretty broad.
I would also. Oh, sorry, Dan.
No, go ahead, Infidel.
I would also say that to say it's the strongest or the smartest, those are oversimplifications too, because it's not always a matter of brute strength or capability. When you look at us as humans, we fall relatively mediocre in most categories, with the exclusion of our brains. We fall middle of the road or lower half of the pack. So I think that when it comes down to evolution, you're talking about something that's far more complicated than whatever creature's biggest, baddest, and can kick everybody's ass.
Yeah. Sorry, Greg. We're gonna have long answers because we get asked this kind of stuff quite a bit. So just be prepared for that. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you guys having long answers because it means you thought about it. I will say this, though, for humans being pretty mediocre, I'm hard-pressed to find a dog with a higher COD KD than me. So at least one thing.
I'm hard-pressed to find a human that can sniff out drugs the way a dog can, though. I mean, we can talk about comparisons all day.
Clearly, you're not. No.
But that's right. That's the thing. But see, Greg, I point this out because that's what evolution is. Evolution is not survival of the strongest. It is the survival of the organism that can exist the best in its environment, right? This is a really hard subtlety that a lot of people don't grasp because they hear about evolution from a non-scientific background and they say, oh, it's all about whoever is the biggest and the strongest, and they think of like the Columbine shooters who had the t-shirts and stuff that were saying that, right? That's sort of like a pop science idea of what it is. It's not really what it talks about. It's always been about context in an environment, what you survive best in. Sometimes that means brains, sometimes that means bronze. It really does depend.
That's a fantastic point that I've never heard of. So I hope to look forward, look into that more myself when I get bored. But to get into the evolutionary question, right? Because I don't want to go too far down the path.
Sure.
Because this is just more so of I want to hear what you guys think rather than arguing evolution. I just thought about this, right? So generally speaking, I think one of the most fascinating components that kind of almost makes the evolution theory kind of blurry in my eyes is the idea of human compassion, because it's incredible the capability humans have to be compassionate. I don't see in any other animal species how the sick, the weak, all these, I hate to say this, but what could be a burden to a species, that sounds terrible, but we got to talk about nature and how unforgiving the world is. We see incredible compassion displayed by people, prolonging the lives of what to another species would have just died. And a lot of the times when we have this compassion towards people of our, you know, our group, our tribe, whatever, you know, it's also often to the detriment of that group. So I just want to hear what you guys think, because I think it blows my mind. That's so fascinating.
If we were to demonstrate to you, Greg, that we can show examples of animals being quote unquote compassionate to each other, would that change your opinion in the likelihood of evolution being true?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
But I would absolutely to hear that, because it's as you guys have said, it's hard to answer these things in very short,
I got you,
one-word sentences in the spur of my car. But
that's
I would
fair.
absolutely like to hear about these stories.
Well, compassion is kind of not a super scientific word, but if we're talking about other kinds of words like pair bonding groups, or family structures within animal species, that absolutely does exist, right? There's absolutely organizations of organisms that go beyond just the self, right? And yeah, a lot of times it's parent to child. Sometimes it's not that, but a lot of times it is that. That's still showing compassion on one level. And also happens in organized communities as well. I think that there is lots of evidence in mammals in particular of this behavior happening. It may, at the end of the day, be a bit more brutish than what we might consider as compassion. But the elements of that are still there, I think, in a lot of mammal organizations. I do think that you can see animals showing quote unquote compassion to each other. I actually think that it's not a completely novel phenomenon in humans. I think it's even older than us, actually. But that would be my answer. What do you think, Infidel?
Well, I know that there have been experiments, and I wish I could remember the specifics of it this moment, but rats and different rodents who actually go back to help others in situations where they're trapped or they're hurt, and they will act in empathetic ways. Also, there are situations where when certain animals get hurt, other animals will start emulating their behavior, almost like in sympathy too. And of course, these are terms that I don't want to give too much humanization and emotion to other animals, but we see behaviors that we would definitely identify as sacrificing their own self-interest in the effort to help another animal. So I definitely think that this is something not unique to humans by a long stretch. And of course, anybody with pets, you see that they will definitely act beyond their self-interest, oftentimes for the well-being or their perception of well-being for their owner, and that's not even the same species. So I think that we definitely sell animals short when we just dismiss them of being these just dumb brutes, and we're the ones that have compassion and we're the ones that have all these things. No, we have it best the way we understand it, but that doesn't mean that they don't have them at all.
Yeah, and I absolutely would agree with what you're saying. I just, I guess more so as an opinion piece, I just think the levels of compassion are just incredible, because with oftentimes, like the very tribalism of the world and like the tribalism of nature, you know what I mean? A lot of that is at a level of, at the highest, I imagine some kind of species or so. Actually, I take that back. But, it's incredible how we can show compassion to all living creatures and all animals and all groups of people. And it just blows my mind, because evolutionarily that would only hurt us, like us showing compassion toward
Greg,
random rhino.
That's great.
World.
Greg, I think you just gave the game away, right? We are the dominant species because we show compassion, right? I mean, that's an argument that's been made by smarter people than me. But I mean, have you ever thought about the fact that maybe we're the species that developed nukes because we're also the species that's willing to change our neighbors' kids' diapers? Like our ability to show compassion to each other has plenty of evolutionary advantages if we're talking about it on a tribal level, right? I think that there is benefit to it, and the fact that we as humans that have been able to discover that have also exploited that.
Okay, but wouldn't you argue that I don't want to say argue, but wouldn't you also kind of think that evolution would actively seek to kind of destroy itself? Because if you allow,
that's why we have wars.
Well,
First, but sorry, Greg, I'm interrupting you. But yeah, infidel.
Evolution doesn't seek to do anything. So just the mere thought of presuming that evolution is something that has this goal in mind, that is trying to seek or achieve some greater aim or some, who's the pinnacle of success. That's not what evolution is. Evolution is a series of mechanisms. And even there, I'm really oversimplifying things. But there is no goal to evolution. There is no purpose even to evolution. Evolution is just what we describe as the mechanisms and our understanding of how things actually happen. There is no greater purpose for evolution.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Greg, your thoughts?
Makes a lot of sense. I just thought of something, but I completely lost it. I actually appreciate that answer. That makes a lot of sense. It doesn't quite click with me 100% just yet, because, I don't, it's one of those things where we will never know truly 100%. And, I imagine you guys are like me. Whenever you don't know something like 100%, it kind of irks with you a little bit because you have that urge to chase it. I mean, look at the name of your guys.
Can I ask you this, Greg? What do you mean we won't know this 100%? We won't know with 100% certainty that evolution is a thing? Because I definitely believe it's a thing. Evolution, I don't have doubts that evolution is a thing. Right?
Well,
not at all.
And this is where the thing where you kind of see a roots differentiate here, because do I think evolution is a potential? Yes. Do I think God played a role? If it were true, 100%, yes. So now it's just kind of teeter-totters on our core belief differences here.
You think? Wait, sorry. Let me understand what you're saying. You're saying that if evolution was true, you would be 100% convinced that God played a role in that?
I don't know about that. And I'm going to be honest, I've never thought of that before.
Okay.
So I should probably be careful as to what I say 100% here, especially because I haven't quite thought about these. Confidently, I guess I could say, because that would make God out to be a monster then, if that were the case. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, there is an argument for, one, I mean, evolution kind of is contrary to a God that designs and moves all things, right? So there's some theological differences you have to make there. Although Kelly in the chat here was pointing this out, and I was thinking this earlier, the Catholic Church actually doesn't deny evolution. I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's no official doctrine that says evolution isn't real whatsoever. In fact, there's many Catholics that are in support of evolution, have studied evolution. So that's something to think about as well. But beyond that, Infidel has something to say. Infidel, I'll pass it to you.
One thing I wanted to say, Greg, is that I was a believer at one point. I wasn't Catholic, but I was definitely a believer. And I found myself similar to where you're bordering now, because I absolutely knew evolution was a fact. There was just too much evidence for me to deny that evolution was a reality. But I did have that, God put his finger on the scale kind of mentality of, tipping the balance for humans and making sure this happens, almost like the puppet master in the background. But really, it does come back to something you said earlier, and that is that if that was the case, yes, you're right, God would be a monster. But the truth is it doesn't take that for God to be a monster, because the world that's here now, it's here regardless of whether it was evolution or God used pixies or whatever he would have used. It still ends up with the world we have. And that is why I say that if there was a God, it would be a monster.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So different thoughts there.
And honestly, yeah. And this is halfway a cop-out when I say I'm not 100%, specialized to talk about that right now. But I also just kind of disagree with you, because I do buy into the whole theological struggle and the whole story of like all the story of like Saint Michael and what happened and how the devil came to be and all that. Now, granted, I have my training wheels on. I'm 19. Again, it sounds like I'm copping out. Partially, it could be, but I would just say I'd like to look into that.
Okay.
I got a lot of time on my hands doing it.
Greg, we've spent quite a bit of time with you, and I, first of all, is 100% okay, because these are the kinds of calls I really like, and I tend to go longer for. If you want to spend more time with us, I won't be here these next 2 weeks. I'm actually traveling, but there's other hosts that host on this show that I'm sure would love to talk to you about some of this stuff, because we're talking about a lot of different ideas here, right? And it's hard to even talk about just one in a single phone conversation. So I appreciate your ability to be open and honest with your beliefs with us. And we totally recognize that, you're definitely on a journey there. And I'm just glad that you shared part of that journey with us. But for now, I really have to let you go, because we got some other folks that need to talk to us, and, got to continue on. But Greg, just want to say, appreciate you calling in, and thanks for sharing your perspective.
I appreciate you guys. We're all on a journey here, hoping to get the answers, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you. What'd you think of that, Infidel?
Well, when he started talking about the evolution and how he maybe not, I couldn't help but think that even though the Catholic Church does accept evolution, they have a doctrine, creatio ex nihilo, which means something creation from nothing. Yeah. So when it gets down to it, whatever the mechanism is, it really doesn't excuse the God itself. And that's one thing that I really hope that Greg can take away and think about, because that's just putting one level of separation between a God that still created the world with the absolute monstrous things that are allowed to happen in it.
Yeah. I think when I hear a conversation like this, and sorry, Infidel, I kind of take over a little bit on this, because you got to understand, I was 19 years old when I first talked to a guy called Anthony Magnabosco, and had a really deep deconstruction of my beliefs. And I know I wasn't ready for a lot of the heavy hitting atheist stuff. It's just it's not conducive to people's where they're at in their particular point in life. And the fact that Greg is willing to talk to us, even though he has very different beliefs from us, and quite actively, I think, are harmful. I'm not going to excuse what he believes on some of the stuff when he talks about sexuality and things like that, right? But there is a metamorphosis happening here too. Like Greg at 19, I don't think is going to be the Greg at 21 or 25 or 30, right? So I'm accepting that this is something that is being looked into. And I would rather a Greg be open and honest about these beliefs that I absolutely disagree with in a conversation in a setting like this, than to hold it privately and to belittle others, or to, do whatever, what we experience to be the negative parts of that belief. I don't think that's Greg's MO. I think Greg is thinking about some stuff, and I don't know. That's something I can support, at least, is having folks with us. A lot of people don't like talking to us, So
yeah, I was 30 before I deconstructed, so I had a lot of really bad ideas, and a lot of them were far worse than anything Greg said. So, I am glad that he's examining them, because that's the first step. Until you actually look at what you believe, you really aren't going to change anything. You're just going to stick with what you know. So that is definitely a good thing, to see him taking a serious look and step back at what he thinks he believes.
Yeah, I agree. Great call. I really enjoyed that a lot. But before we keep moving on here, I want to give a shout out, because we have a super chat, and the super chat is, I'm not sure what the currency is. If so, it's CZK. I don't know. Is that Czech? I'm not sure what the country of origin is. I think that's Czech. I'm not sure what the amount is there, but we got a donation that said, Infidel64 issue is that main goal of current AI endeavor is profit and not a well-being movement. That's why there is reason to fear. What do you think? AI could help us if the goal is right. What do you think of that?
Well, I use the AI every day. So starting there, it would be a little hypocritical for me to say, oh, let's all run to the hills over AI. And of course, there are dangers, but that's true with anything. We don't make something safe by putting it in a box and pretending it doesn't exist. This is something that, to use the genie's out of the bottle. We're going to have to address this. And ultimately, I do think we will work out some ways to find that balance. At the beginning of anything, it's hard to know what's going to happen. But with this, I think we'll muddle through it and get to the end. And I really do think it can be a tool that will be better for us.
Yeah, that's from Quantum Answer, by the way. I didn't say the name there. Yeah, personally, I think UBI is the solution. I think that's the only reasonable thing I think anyone has brought to the conversation. So whenever we get UBI, yeah, as soon as we fix, all the other stuff that happens in America, like our healthcare system and stuff, I guess we'll get to UBI. I don't know if that's going to happen though, unfortunately. But hey, we got another super chat from Jimmy Jr. giving $9.99, saying shout out to Dan for nailing Saphri'ell in one shot, and to Infidel for being awesome. I think AI will decipher dead languages, translate ancient texts, and shed more light on religious origins. I don't want to say I nailed anybody in one shot. I think Saphri'ell was being pretty cordial to us, pretty open about their ideas. But obviously I have difference of thought there. So I appreciate you giving that shout out. And yeah, a lot of conversation about AI today is happening here. Last one is from some kind of Dickie who gave $5 and said Dragon Dynamo, and that's it. I think it got cut off there. Maybe not. Maybe it's just Dragon Dynamo, that's a cool thing to donate. So shout outs to you for that. Okay, let's get going here, because I think we have time for at least one more call, maybe another one. I don't know. But we have oh my goodness, we got a couple different ones here. Let's talk to, we got Ghost Call in here. We got folks talking about UFOs. We got like a lot of good ones here. I'm going to take the one I think would be good. We got Ben calling in from Illinois. Ben, you're live on Truth Wanted. You said that you have experienced a ghost and you have a story about it. Tell us about it, Ben. Hello, Ben, you there? You're live on Truth Wanted. All right, not hearing from you, Ben. I'm going to return you back to the queue. We'll put you back in there. Not sure if we'll get to you tonight, but we will see. I do want to talk to Tim. Haven't heard from Tim in a minute. This is Tim from Washington. Tim, happy to hear from you again. What's going on?
Hey, Dan, how are you? A lot going on, actually. I've been watching the news and the last few months in particular, but definitely the last few years. Let me preface this by saying that I am, by every account, a Jesus mythicist. And so I believe that everything having to do with Christianity is as mythical as Odin and Zeus and Osiris and all of the others that we have always relegated to mythology level. And what breaks my heart is my community, the LGBTQIA community, in particular, my trans brothers and sisters, have been attacked with policies that are all based on this mythology, this belief in this made-up story out of a bunch of books that are essentially, as far as I'm concerned, Aesop fables. And it breaks my heart because, the recent attack on poor little Dex just hurts my heart. And I'm so sad that we have to deal with making policies based on mythology. And so I wanted to call into your show so that I can vent about that a little bit, because it really, really frustrates me.
Yeah, just so we give some context for people. So next is the name of a non-binary student that was recently killed in Oklahoma, and there is an investigation as to exactly what happened there. I don't know what's latest on that actually, so I don't want to like factually misreport anything. But what we do know is that this was a student that was harassed for their trans identity. And a lot of people are talking about this being the reason as to their death. Of course, there's people disputing that, right? But in no uncertain terms, this student was definitely harassed. As far as everything that's come out so far, their identity was definitely questioned, and it may or may not have been part of the death. Again, I just don't want to misreport if there's anything else that's come up. But what I've seen, it seems that you know there's evidence to believe that that's the case, and I don't doubt it, because how many people have had stories of being harassed just for being trans, let alone being teenagers and talking about their identities more openly. Even though we live in a time where people are being more open about their identities, particularly young people, that doesn't mean the level of hate has necessarily gone down. It's just a lot of people are less afraid to say it, right? So a lot of people that are hiding their hate instead, because the dominant culture is slowly shifting little by little towards saying like, hey, being hateful in that kind of way is wrong. But it's not everywhere. There is this myth that said, oh, America is this progressive place now, and LGBT people can live free and happy and do whatever the hell they want. And they can't. And they can't because of stories like this one. So it is really unfortunate. Yeah. And it's really sad that there are people that will cling to an ideology because it justifies their hate. And Christianity is definitely one of those potential ideologies that justifies it. And I grieve with you, Tim. I don't know what to say about it other than it is a tragedy.
And it also hurts my heart. A few months ago, I heard the story of the family in, I believe it was from Texas, after there were laws that were made that, and I say Texas, it could be any one of those. There are 3 or 4 states that have put it into law that gender affirming care for a child, for a teenager, is child abuse, and a family had to uproot themselves from the state and move to a state that is more that doesn't have that particular policy. And that moving within a town can break a person. I just moved into my own apartment, and I am struggling trying to make all my bills just from the move. I can imagine moving a whole family out of your state so that you can give your child gender affirming care so that they can actually be who they are.
Yeah.
And again, it's a disruption of a family. It's heartbreaking and absolutely heart-wrenching to hear these stories of these people that are just, and I know that there are some right-wing commentators that were really upset that Fox News did a story about a family who has a 14-year-old trans son. And when he was 3 or 4, he was actually showing himself to be, and I wish his first name was Ryland. And they did a whole story.
I as soon as you said it, I know what you're talking about, because it's like the only time Fox News has ever been nice to LGBT people in like a humanizing way. And it's really weird to watch it, because it's like, oh, this gets kind of strange. And they got so much flack for it. I'm pretty sure they've never done it again. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. Anyway, I've seen what you're talking about, Tim.
It was a beautiful story, and all of a sudden here we are. Oh my God, we need God's way going. Well, you know what? God's a myth, and what we need is we need humanity to show your last caller was talking about compassion. We're not showing compassion to our trans brothers and sisters. Forcing them, or by simply bullying them, for lack of a better word.
Well, I'll tell you this, Tim, and then I want Infidel to give their point too. Is that if your church, if you're a Greg out there, right, and you're listening, and you're thinking about all this stuff, if your church isn't talking about how they can better help the LGBT community, what is the purpose of your church? And I'm not saying it should be only helping LGBT people. What I'm saying is, if you can't recognize that the source of violence that occurs to LGBT people, particularly LGBT youth, doesn't stem at all from your religious beliefs, if you don't even see where that connection is made, how can you understand where the opposite happens? How can I trust you in knowing what compassion is if you can't even understand where it fails? Right. And this is a failure. And we obviously can't blame it squarely on Christianity, but it has a heavy burden to bear, right? In all of this, it is complicit. As long as churches exist that continue to, if not harass, then at least not even talk about the issues that are occurring in our country from people who think and look and dress just like them, then what is even the point of having a church and a group of people that say that you're compassionate and you want what's best for everybody in the world if you're not going to talk about it? I don't know. It's very very sad to see. Infidel, please.
Tim, you really hit home with this, because having a gender fluid child, it really gets very personal for me. But when I heard the state representative from Oklahoma talking about NEX and saying that, we have a Republican supermajority here and we're a Christian state, and I'm going to vote with my constituents, and that's why we don't want this filth here. That is exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about, religion and it perpetuating nothing but hate, because this is driven by, more often than not, by religious leaders. They're hammering this home, and they're making political gain. They're getting political capital on what literally at this point is caused a death, and not the first one, and it won't be the last one. We're looking at a cycle that's going to continue, because as long as we have people that are willing to excuse the inexcusable, we're just going to keep seeing this. And when you talk about a state like Oklahoma, I don't know if you're aware of this case, but there was a case here recently where a young man wanted to change his gender in the school in their database, and went through the courts. Family supported him, went to the courts, got it approved, and the superintendent of education there, Ryan Walters, was so gung-ho against it that he called an emergency session to get an emergency rule in to make sure that that was not allowed. And to me, I wish people would step on the fact of, let's be compassionate. Let's be aware that what we do does impact people. You mentioned the people who don't have, or moving to other states because their well-being of their child is literally in danger, and that's completely unacceptable. And I think it's important that we point these people out and not let them get away with this, because when we say that these things cost people their lives, we're not talking hyperbole. We mean that literally, and that has to stop.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. Tim, anything else you want to add?
No. Infidel brought up Ryan Walters, and it's like, oh God, don't even get me started on that one. I am in complete agreement with everything that Infidel just said, because, obviously because I started this conversation, right? But yeah, it's just breaking my heart that we've come so far in the LGBTQIA plus community, and with policies, and then I've watched us move forward to even Obergefell, and us being able to marry whom we choose. And it looks like we're taking 3 giant steps back after these 6 giant steps forward.
Yeah.
And it's just breaking my heart. And so yeah, that's basically what I came on to say. So
I hear you, Tim. Yeah, I hear you. I'll tell you this: in my church communities, we never, ever said, "Hey, let's help the LGBT people around us." And if we did bring up LGBT people, it was never in positive terms, right? Again, that's just my anecdote. That's just one lived experience of Christians. But how many does that match, right? You can't say I'm in the minority. You cannot. You absolutely no uncertain terms say I'm the minority. I think that's a lot of people's experiences. I'm aware that progressive church groups and systems exist and do want to help for LGBT causes. And you know what? That's all fine and dandy. But you're always going to be in the minority if you fight in that.
I mean, I was. Yeah. You know that I was an ex-gay minister. And I was in the church way back before I was 38 and decided to begin my deconversion. So yeah, I know exactly. We're not the exception. We're not the fringe. We've experienced it and we know it. We've experienced it from both sides. Well, and so yeah, it's sad.
It is sad. It is sad. But Tim, I think there is some hope because you and I are having a conversation about it right now on the internet for several thousand people to see, and that wasn't a thing a couple of years ago, right? Not just talking about ACA shows. So it's just talking about the conversation in general, right? That is a sign of something, as weak as that may be, that is something. That's not an avenue by which people were able to express themselves, mainstream media or otherwise. So yeah, I am hopeful that things can still change. I am doubtful that it will ever be perfect, but I am hopeful that more and more people are starting to see things our way. That, hey, this is wrong, and that this is something that should be stopped and should be fought against. But progress is not linear. It's not always a straight line. It's not always just, we have all these rights and we have all this acceptance and it's going to be that way forever. And I think history has shown that time and time again. So we always have to keep fighting, unfortunately. But I'll do it. I'll keep fighting. I ain't stopping. Not anytime soon, anyway. But with that rant out of the way, Tim, I will let you go. Thank you so much for your thoughts and for calling in as usual. Tim, repeat caller of the show. Love talking to Tim. Always has a great perspective. Infidel, any other thoughts about that call?
Well, I have to say that I agree with you that we stumble along to progress more than we do. It's not linear. Yeah. And with that in mind, it's good to know that one of the reasons that they are getting so shrill right now is because they are losing this battle. Church attendance is down. Religion is especially the more fundamentalists. They're hurting, and so I hate to say wait them out. But at the end of the day, some people are never going to change their minds. But I do think that in the long run, we are still heading in the right direction. It doesn't exactly make us feel comfortable right now, though.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. As more and more people are deconstructing, I think it's the goal of organizations like ours and the conversations that we have like ours to put paths in place for people to be more understanding of the issues at large, and also to give them a community and a space for which they can sort of recognize their own path in that, because I know I needed that, right? I was not born thinking that gay people were okay or not okay or whatever. That was all indoctrinated into me when I was a kid, right? And I got out of it relatively early compared to a lot of people's stories. So how much longer can it take for some people to do that work to get out of it, right? If we're not directly changing people's minds, we can at least help those who are thinking about stuff and who are sort of wanting ways out of the worldview, but they don't know how. They just don't see a way to make things work. So there's all kinds of work to be done, right? It's not just let's turn this guy from the Westboro Baptist Church into thinking my way. How about your neighbor? How about the folks that are around you that you can have the most impact on? There's something to be said about that, I think, as well. But we are getting close to the end of the show. Thank you to all the folks who are still on the line. Sorry that we couldn't get to you tonight, but if you call in next week, I'm sure we'll have some time for you, especially if you get in real early onto the show. I want to thank Infidel64 for being on A Truth Wanted again. It's been a little bit. Thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on. It was great.
Yeah, and if people want to find out more about you, where can they find you at?
Well, nonprofits would be the place to go. That's pretty much what occupies a good portion of my time these days. Get to be on there with people like Scott and Cynthia and even Kelly. I like to give Kelly a hard time, but he really is a great guy. So it really is one of those things that I've really enjoyed being on nonprofits.
Speaking of Cynthia, actually, Cynthia McDonald did give us a super chat earlier, which I should read out, giving $5, saying cats have empathy for owners. They've bonded with and elephants mourn their dead. And I think that's true. In both circumstances. I don't say that you pick cats. Listen, cats are not the best. You should have picked a dog. Come on. How many times has your cat just ignored you whenever you call for it and want to give it cuddles? Come on, Cynthia. You could have picked a better one there. Anyway, I'm giving Cynthia a hard time because she knows I can't. Alex Dallas Foist, a good friend of mine, gave $5 and said the urge to sing "The Lion Sleeps Tonight" is always just a whim away. And they said this like 20 minutes ago in the super chat. I don't know what that was in reference to. Do you know what that's in reference to? I'm not sure. I don't know the context. I can't remember that.
I don't recall the context, but I do promise everyone that I will not sing, so everyone can relax. I'm not going to do that, but
yeah,
no, I don't know.
I won't be singing either, mostly for copyright reasons. But regardless, thank you, Alex, for donating. You rock. For doing that. And there is going to be an after show. If you like to see what happens with some of the crew and some of the hosts, you should go to the after show. And there's going to be a link to that in the description. It's just a Discord server that we hang out in and ask questions to, or you guys ask questions to the host typically. And just not recorded. And it's just a fun time. So come join us. It's at tiny.cc/ACD Discord if you want to do that. And I want to thank the backup hosts tonight. We got Kelly, who has been here this whole time. Oh, he just left. Wow, he literally just left right before I got to thank him there. But Kelly is going to the after show right now. So shout outs to Kelly. And again, for giving just the most righteous middle finger I've seen like in a long time. That dude, he was born ready to do that. I swear, that was crazy. I'd never seen Kelly like that. But anyway, it was a good time. The prompt this week is what seems normal in the middle of the day, but is terrifying in the middle of the night. Leave your comment below the video, and your comment might be read on next week's episode. We'll get our top 3 answers for that next week. But other than that, Infidel64, you got any words of wisdom for our audience today? Let's bring back the words of wisdom.
You asked the wrong person for that. You should have pulled Kelly on here if you wanted.
You're right. I should have pulled Kelly on that. Kelly would have come up with something good. Nothing?
At least the tongue twister.
Anything? What's on your mind? Words of wisdom. Go ahead.
Well, going back to the question of the week, make sure you do your digging during the day and do the body burying at night, and that way maybe your neighbor won't notice.
That's some good words of wisdom. Make sure you do your digging during the day and bury your bodies at night. This has been another episode of Truth Wanted, folks. Remember to always keep on the truth. I'm Objectively Dan. I'll see you next time.
watch the non-prophets and join the hosts in the live chat. Visit tiny.cc/ytnp.